Hello, I'm Minister Sharon Brown. Welcome to week 3 of our Lent Bible study, Navigating Chaos. We so far have named our chaos and looked at chaos from a biblical perspective. Our subtopic for this week is chaos, community, and conflict. Chaos is never isolated to an individual. Our individual disorder impacts the communities around us. Because when we experience individual chaos, it trickles out to our communities. Imagine a family breadwinner that loses his or her job. This is a traumatic and chaotic event for the individual. However, the entire family suffers. And how many of you have been on a project at work where one person may be experiencing personal or professional chaos? This one person's chaos not only threatens the success of the project, but it creates burdens and mayhem for the rest of the team. On the other hand, there are times an entire community is hurled into chaos all at once. This can be due to internal disagreements among community members, lack of competent leadership, external agitators, natural disasters, even a pandemic. Such events undoubtedly disrupt community order. At the start of the pandemic, some of us were forced to abruptly abandon communities like work, school, worship, and social circles. Some have had to adjust to our surrounding communities in different ways. Housemates, spouses, and family that were used to spending working hours apart were suddenly compelled to spend more time interacting, or in some cases, trying to ignore each other for an extra 10 to 12 hours a day. Children lost a community of school, while parents were forced to take on communal roles like teachers and daycare providers while still working. Sometimes chaos or disorder in one area of our lives can cause conflict with those in our lives that have nothing to do with the chaos itself, but rather are easy targets on which to unleash frustrations, as evidenced by the increased cases of domestic violence over the past 2 years. Communities are often fraught with chaos. However, community is essential to our physical, emotional, and mental well-being, and also our spiritual well-being. We learn to negotiate these relationships in order to maintain communication and community. But sometimes the conflict goes deep. In mediation circles, conflict is defined as something that jeopardizes or severs a healthy relationship. Without a doubt, relationships have suffered during the last few years. An even deeper reality is that there may be relationships from further back in our past that are still suffering because we left the conflict unresolved. As we gradually re-engage in community, we may realize that we left conflicts unaddressed, or that adjusting to these communities again actually creates conflict. And rest assured, Christian communities are not exempt from chaos and conflict, as we will see in 1 Corinthians. The Christian community of Corinth was birthed from Paul's 1.5-year missionary trip to the area. Many had become believers and formed community with Paul and other believers as a result. However, after leaving, Paul received reports of problems that had arisen among the church of Corinth. There were reports of divisions because people had developed allegiances to different leaders since Paul left. Paul responds by reminding them that the church is a community of people centered around Jesus, and that leaders are but servants of God. Paul also received reports of immorality and lawsuits in the church. Paul reminds them that Jesus died for their sins. Paul speaks particularly about sexual immorality, which creates brokenness in relationships. However, this can be expanded to all sin, which creates fissures in our relationships with God and with each other. The believers in Corinth also disagreed over whether it was okay to eat meat, which had been sacrificed to Greek or Roman gods. Paul offers practical advice rooted in the gospel to address this conflict. He reminds them that their first allegiance is to Christ, who is the creator of all things, even the meat sacrificed to idols. However, if there is someone observing who may misinterpret your behavior and it leads them to think it is okay to worship other gods, then you should not eat the meat. However, if no one is around who could be led astray by your behavior, it was okay to eat the meat. Paul leans into the core gospel principle of love for the basis of this advice. Because of love, a person would deny themselves the meat to prevent another from stumbling. Paul also promotes God's love as the tool to address the disunity and chaos that had arisen in their worship gatherings. Paul reminds them that the church is a community of persons with different gifts. The expression of these gifts should be for the building up and unifying of the church, not to create chaos. The key to all Paul's instructions and advice in this letter is to get the Corinthians to mend their community by thinking of every area of their life through the lens of the gospel, the good news of Christ. We will be looking at some practical conflict resolution tips and strategies this week, and I hope this will help us in building up our family, social, professional, and worship communities. I'm truly looking forward to gathering with you on Thursday to discuss this further.